So to follow up on the whole Vince McMahon situation, everybody, as it predicted, have talked about it. JD talked about it. Just Alex talked about it. Solomonster talked about it. Everybody that pretty much does a YouTube wrestling video, or channel, pretty much has talked about it. And to be quite honest, I don't blame them for talking about it or being, potentially, upset at, basically a very far out possibility. And the reason I say very far out is because a lot of people pretty much are assuming Vince can just walk in. And like I said in my video and podcast, if you will, I kind of alluded to that, to the fact that won't be easy. And one person over at the Pro Wrestling World Facebook page actually did a little bit of an essay, a little bit of an article, if you will, on the entire situation. And this is by David over at the Pro Wrestling World Facebook page. He posted this. Let me check. Let me just double check when he posted this, guys. Hold on for a sec. He posted this, about 15 hours ago at 10:56 p.m. Pacific time. And this is what he had to say, and I quote. This is from David from the Pro Wrestling World Facebook page. This is what he had to say, and I quote. A lot of people are acting like Vince McMahon can just walk back into power in WWE. These people are showing that they really don't understand how public corporations work. There are two ways. The extremely unlikely next to impossible scenario is the board voting to reinstate him. Most of the board wanted Vince gone, with Wall Street Journal actually saying that a member of the board secretly liked the sex stuff in the first place. I don't know what that means. Option 2, the nuclear option. Vince McMahon can simply vote to replace the board entirely and override them. This would be a disaster. Most, if not all, the major investors would exit the company, and they have representatives on the board. In addition, he'd be firing Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Nick Khan in a single shot. It would tank WWE stock, costing Vince untold millions. It would essentially run the risk of burning WWE to the ground. A company can make money and go into bankruptcy because of stock collapse, and such an action from Vince would run the risk of that. It would also open the door to a full-fledged SEC investigation, because if Vince took the nuclear option and appointed himself chairman of a hand-picked board, he would be ignoring rules and ethics agreed to for the SEC, and that's a killer bee nest right there. I wouldn't want to poke. Also, they say plus. The board opted not to charge him with embezzlement, even though they said that Vince used company funds without consulting the board and hid use from the company to pay off all the women. They still have that option, and if Vince made a play to unseat them, they could press charges, which would lock up the entire corporate structure in place and render Vince meaningless. So yeah, Vince ain't coming back, y'all. He didn't have much hope before, but now with the new sexual assault allegations that we've all talked about, Vince is gone for good. So, depending on how you want to word what David just put up there 15 hours ago, he's basically saying that Vince, is not coming back because of several reasons. One reason would be that the board would have to vote him in. The current board right now would have to unanimously vote him in, have to unanimously vote to reinstate him, to unseat both Stephanie and Nick Khan as co-CEOs and co-chair people. He would have to do that. Or they would have to do that, I should say. But that's not going to happen because most of the board has made it knowledge that they do not want Vince back. And in addition to that, you have shareholders, stockholders and investors that feel the same way, except maybe a few people. Now, he brought up the other option that could, potentially happen, if not not realistically, but potentially could if Vince wanted to go this route, and that's the nuclear option. The nuclear option being that Vince could potentially override everybody, fire the entire board, which includes his daughter, which includes his son-in-law, which includes a very close friend of The Rock and Nick Khan, and basically replace him with people that are essentially yes men and women to him. People that be like, yes Vince, yo, correct Vince, let's do that Vince, yes. And that would basically be a public disaster. That would be. It would be a public disaster without even contemplating it or even thinking, would it be? No, without, what I'm trying to say is not even without contemplating it or even wondering, would it be? No, it would be, no doubt, it would be. Now, the reason it would be a disaster, as they put it, is because they have investors. Let me reread that. Or let me relook at that. Basically, the reason they say it would be a disaster is if not all major investors would exit the company because they have representatives on the board. So in other words, if you have, let's say, an investor from such and such place investing millions of dollars into the company, and they have somebody on the board that's representing them, if that person gets fired by Vince, and Vince is like, I'm getting rid of you because you're not going to vote me in, so I'm going to get somebody that's going to say yes to me all the time. If that person goes, then the investor goes with them. That's pretty much what they're saying here. And like they pointed out, in addition, and as I just said, he'd be releasing his daughter, his son-in-law, and the friend of The Rock, Nick Khan, off of the board too, because he wants to have the final say. But on top of that, even though they'd still make money, they'd be going into a bankruptcy situation because the funds wouldn't be, as profitable as they should be because the stock would collapse for them. And basically, if Vince was to want to try to overstep his boundaries and to try to regain power, he'd be running the risk at destroying his own company. Now, they also bring up the fact that it would open the door for a full-fledged SEC investigation because, as they put it again, let me reread this, because if Vince took the nuclear option and appointed himself chairman of a hand-picked board, he would be ignoring rules and ethics agreed to and by for the SEC, and that's a killer bee nest that nobody would want to poke. In other words, basically, if he was to go this route, the SEC could easily start their investigation or reignite their investigation into all these allegations and stuff that Vince has been accused of, even the more publicly recent ones, and basically really tie things up to almost no end. Almost no end. Now here's the thing. They also pointed out, as I read, that the board opted not to charge Vince with embezzlement, even though they said that Vince used company funds without consulting the board and hid the use from the company to pay off all the women. And that they still have that option. And what they mean by the option is just because they didn't charge him at first doesn't mean they can't go back to that option and charge him, right now. As we speak. Because as they say, and I quote, they still have the option, and if Vince made a play to unseat them, they could, press charges, which would lock up the entire corporate structure in place and render Vince meaningless. In other words, if Vince tried to make a play, tried to intimidate himself into getting back on top, if you will, the board could say, no, that ain't happening. Oh, by the way, you remember that embezzlement we didn't decide to charge you with? Guess what? We're going to press charges on it right now if you don't, back off. They could basically threaten him. They can basically I guess you could say intimidate. They could basically threaten him. They can intimidate him into stepping away, into basically not considering this option to come back by saying, hey, you come back, we'll press charges against you. You want that? And what that would do is lock the company up to where it is right now, and Vince would have nothing to do. Vince would have no reasoning to have to be there. So, yeah, in the end, according to David, the Pro Wrestling World's Facebook page, there ain't no way, because of everything they depicted, and I'll put this in the description, there ain't no way Vince is coming back. There ain't no way. Because if he does, it's going to be it's basically going to cause an entire shitstorm, for both sides of the structure. And not just a shitstorm for the roster, and not just a shitstorm for the board that he would try to replace. It would cause a shitstorm for himself, because basically, as they said, this would open the door for the SEC to investigate, all these allegations, if not more, that are coming out about Vince, because Vince, didn't basically live up to his word and stay away. He didn't stay away. And what's funny is a lot of people say that the reason that Vince wants to try to come back is because he doesn't know what else to do. This is his life. This is his life, and he doesn't know anything else. And he needs this mistress of WWE back in his life. He needs it. Well, guess what? This mistress, this ex of his, don't need him. The roster has let it be known. The people within the offices of Stamford, Connecticut have let it be known. The stockholders, the shareholders, the trade holders, they've let it be known. They don't want Vince back. They don't want Vince back because all Vince, in their eyes, is when he's in charge, he's just like, oh, well, Otis, I don't think I want you in Alpha Academy anymore. I want you to be the bumbling Otis again. And I want you to like food all the time. And you can have someone like Otis go like, but that's not what the fans like about Alpha Academy. And he'd be like, I don't. And to them, Vince would be like, oh, I don't care what the fans want. It's what I want. I want to laugh. Ha, ha, ha. That's what they don't want. That's what they don't want. I mean, it'd be like with Johnny Gargano. You imagine Johnny Gargano under Vince's watch? He could look at Johnny and be like, you're not Johnny Wrestling, you're Super Johnny. We're going to do special effects on you. You're going to get superpowers. We're going to fly you to the ring. You'll be Super Johnny. And Johnny could be like, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense wrestling-wise. And Vince could be like, oh, it's not, well, I don't care if it makes sense wrestling-wise. It makes sense because to me, it makes money. It's a gimmick. It makes money. And that's what they don't want. Because when Vince and his crew would make these kind of decisions, it hurt WWE. Whether it's Raw, SmackDown, or to an extent NXT. They don't want that anymore. They don't want that. So Vince basically, whatever he's thinking, he can pretty much shelve it indefinitely. He can shelve it indefinitely. Now, yes, could he make trouble for them? Absolutely. But again, as they pointed out here, all that would do is run WWE at the risk of being destroyed, basically killed off. And I know a lot of people have said that when Vince McMahon on camera would come out and say, oh, I'm going to kill my company, I'll take it with me when I die, for him to say that on camera in character, people wouldn't put it past the fact that it's not just in character, but it's an extension of how he really feels. So, yeah, people don't want that to happen. People that invested in this company don't want it to happen. So, again, if Vince is thinking about that, he might want to reconsider, especially with the new allegations. Again, like I said, and everybody else has pointed out, could he make a mess of things? Oh, absolutely. He can make a huge legal mess of things, throughout his attempt to get back in. He can make life miserable for people if he wanted to. But again, as David here of Pro Wrestling World pointed out, all that would do is motivate the board to say, okay, we're going to press charges against you for embezzlement. And then those charges on top of the allegations, that wouldn't look good for Vince. And then you have what people consider an extended version of Dark Side of the Ring last night with the 9 Lives of Vince McMahon. And the smear campaign that did, making him look even worse. Yeah, I don't think Vince should consider coming back. Again, the only reason, as people point out, that he's trying to consider that option of wanting to, plan to try to make a return, is he doesn't know what to do with himself. Well, you know what, Vince? I'll say this, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying this. Maybe if I was you, Vince McMahon, I should have thought about my future post-WWE before I decided to start doing all these things that I've been accused of, publicly and NDA-wise. I should have thought better. I should have thought first about the consequences, and then once I thought about the consequences, not consider them at all ever again. That's what I would have done, Vince. That's what I would have done. But you didn't do it, and now look where you're at. So, yeah. Could Vince make life miserable for WWE in an attempt to retake power? Absolutely. But as David of Pro Wrestling World puts it, not so fast, my friend, because, with everything he pointed out here, and again, I'll list it in the description, yeah, Vince might want to reconsider trying to make a return. That's all I can say. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment below, live chat during the premiere, like the video. This will also be a podcast on my audio podcast series of BW Rose's Discussions at all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora, which, by the way, by the time you listen to this might be at number 500. That's right, I'm 5 podcasts away from 500. So let me know what your thoughts are, though, down below. Live chat during the premiere, like the video. You can find me at Vimeo at BW Roses for content you can't get on YouTube. Support me at Venmo at Brian-Roman-2, Cash App at BW Roses 98. Also, find me at patreon.com/BW Roses for the $1 to $3 tier. Also, Teespring store is open in time for the holidays. Find some stuff for you and for yourself, friends, and family at my Teespring store. Also, ladies and gentlemen, check me out at divanart.com/BVW1979. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. How do you feel about this? Do you think there's any truth to the matter here? Or do you think maybe, just maybe, what I'm trying to say is, do you think there's any truth to the matter? Or maybe, just maybe, Vince, I don't know how to close this out, guys. But okay, let me rewind. All right. In closing, do you think there's any truth to this, that any of this could happen, that like David said, or do you think maybe Vince contemplating a return is just that, contemplating and probably being talked out of it due to everything that's come out already in the past few months and just recently? Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll talk to y'all later.